Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for who have joined us. Thank you for those who commit themselves to the service of our community. Thank you for your faithfulness and service to us. Thank you for our health, our ability to serve, and just the heart that you've given everyone in this club to be a light in this community and in this city. We thank you for that. We thank you for our speaker this morning. We ask that you bless all of us in everything that we do. We ask your blessings and protections on those who serve us, our police and fire, first responders, our military here and overseas. And we ask your blessings and guidance on those who lead us here at the state, local, and national level. I ask all these things in Jesus' name, amen. Good morning, Lake Highlands.
Morning.
Or all 24 of us this morning so far. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. I think we've got a great program this morning. I'm happy to see Ms. Toler on the call. So thanks for jumping in and joining us this morning. Just a couple of quick announcements. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Trafone to kick us off with a note about the spring fundraising event.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, Lake Highlands. So if you tuned in last week, you heard the update that despite things looking better in terms of the pandemic, and despite the changes to the mask requirement this week, we're still doing a virtual event, and we're kind of hoping this will be the last virtual event we have to do. And we can get back to in-person things after that. But May 22nd is the date of our spring fundraiser. It will be virtual. We're trying to plan a lot of fun things to make that night fun for everybody to join us. But even though the pandemic has changed the way we get together, it hasn't changed the need for us to raise money to help our causes, right? We give a lot of money every year in terms of scholarships to high school students. We give out a lot of money every year in terms of grants to local nonprofits in the area. And without Oktoberfest last year, the need is almost even greater this year for the success of the spring fundraiser. So we need your help. And you can help in kind of one of three ways. One, you can donate a silent auction item or a live auction item, kind of an experience or a house or something like that for a long weekend. You can donate as a sponsor. And lastly, and right now, the most importantly as well, is spread the word. We want this to be an event for the community, not just for the Exchange Club. So we'd love everybody to participate in the community to help us raise that money. So we'll be talking kind of more about the different areas. Like next week, we'll have Wes Johnson talk about sponsorships. He's doing a great job getting us going. We have actually already secured 3 sponsors, which is really exciting. And then we'll be following up with more information and a call to action to the group. But again, May 22nd, virtual fundraiser. We're kind of thinking of it as a theme of the last virtual event, hopefully forever, but at least for the foreseeable future. With that, Chris, I'll turn it back to you if there's no questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Nathan. We're looking forward to it. I know y'all are working hard on putting together a fun and engaging event. So thank you. And I would echo his exhortation for folks to get involved, find a way to help out, provide a silent or a live auction item, make a donation, and definitely get it on your calendar and get it on your friends' calendar. So let's do that, and we'll have a good time on May 22nd. My only other announcement, unless someone can remind me of something else, is to just echo, I think, what Bill put into the Facebook page yesterday, but in a week, or less than a week, just less than a week, the club showed its generosity and its commitment to those who serve us. And with the call to action last Friday of, let's get some donations in and make a contribution to Officer Penton's family through the Northeast Department's drive-through fundraising event, or it wasn't even a fundraiser. They just said, if you want to make a contribution, you can drop it off at the substation on Thursday the 4th. And so we did. And the call went out on Friday, make a contribution, send some money to Bill Boyd, send some money to Doug Raby. And the club responded. And we made a $2,000 donation to Officer Penton's family yesterday. Doug dropped it off at the substation. So big thanks to Bill and Doug for taking charge on that. And big thanks to those who made contributions. I think that's above and beyond. When we typically pass the hat at a Friday morning meeting, we get a couple of hundred or a few $100s. This was an outstanding response and is much appreciated. So for those of you on the call that donated, thank you. For those who aren't, big thanks, and job well done. That's a great representation of what our club is all about and what folks in our community are all about. And obviously that's something that'll be of great benefit to Officer Penton's very young family. So thank y'all. And okay, with that, I'm going to pause, wave your hand, scream at me if I'm failing to address something that's coming up that I should talk about. All right, not much, which is great because that means more time to hear from our great guest this morning. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much. Good morning. When I moved to Lake Highlands in 2014, the concept of neighborhood level journalism had never crossed my radar screen. Just didn't occur to me that existed. It did not take long for me to figure out up here, though, that anytime anything of importance happens in Lake Highlands, my first visit on the web to read about it is not to a city newspaper or TV station. It's the Lake Highlands Advocate, and I think we're pretty unique in having that resource, and that's really a credit to the work that Carol has done, tirelessly writing about major events affecting our neighborhood, restaurant openings. I mean, if you go to their website, just the volume of information about the goings on in our neighborhood is just incredible. So I'm excited to have Carol Toler in with us today to talk with us about her mission there, why she does what she does, and maybe share some of her favorite stories over the years with us. Carol is a longtime resident of the neighborhood. Has 4 kids who've graduated from Lake Highlands High School, including 1 club member. It doesn't look like Will was able to join this morning, but it was short notice. Sorry, Carol. With that, I will turn the floor over to Carol and let her share her story. Although I guess one note for the club. Carol is kind enough to join us today on her birthday, I'm told. So that's all. Wish her a happy birthday. And Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for those very kind words. I do feel like I understand as well as anybody, except maybe y'all's wives, how hard y'all work for the community. I've watched all that you've done over the many years. I've covered some of the things, but I know that y'all do the big things, the scholarship money and, the parade and all of the things that the community sees. But I also know there are a lot of smaller things that the community just never finds out about, like the gifts to Officer Penton's family. And part of what I consider my job is to let the community know what you're doing, but I feel like I'd be writing about it every day. And I know that's not why you do it. You don't do it to be written up in the newspaper or a magazine. But I just want you to know that I think the community knows and realizes, but I certainly know and realize. And it was a big honor to me when you guys presented me with the Unsung Hero Award. And that was a big thrill for me, a big surprise for me. And it's on my wall right now. So I look at it every day here in my little office where I do my typing and working. So A few years ago, I interviewed Jody Zorn when he was working on YMCA stuff. And he told me that he would live in Lake Highlands until they carried him out in a pine box. And I have remembered that till today, and I feel the same way. I want to live here for the rest of my life, and I think most of you probably feel the same way. As Michael said, it's where I raised my 4 kids, Toby and I. They graduated in 2005, 2006, 2009, and 2010. So it's been a while, but I've been involved in organizations here in Lake Highlands, from Women's League to PTAs at all the kids' schools to Healing Hands Ministries and other organizations throughout Dallas, Children's Medical Center, Auxiliary, Promise House, other groups where I did fundraising. And what the job that usually they ask me to do within these groups is PR and communications. And it's something I enjoy doing. It's not what my background is. I was in banking before I had kids, but for whatever reason, it's what I started doing and was successful doing. And I would submit stories to the various outlets. At that time, I started doing it in the 90s. And at that time, we had a bunch of outlets in Lake Highlands. Of course, I would always submit to Dallas Morning News. And at that time, we had a supplement to the Dallas Morning News called Neighbors Go. Some of you may remember that. It was all Lake Highlands. It was different in each neighborhood, but it was all Lake Highlands stories. And they would always publish anything I would send about any group I was trying to publicize. We also had a Lake Highlands People newspaper by the same people that put out Preston Hollow People and Park Cities People and all that, in addition to Lake Highlands Advocate and other things. So I was sending publicity to all these different outlets. One of the things that the people I would send to told me that the reason they liked my stuff is I would send a little bit of a different version to each one. I'd send different pictures to each one. And that's something that you might think about and remember in the different groups you're with, whether it's your church or your kids' scout group or whatever. If you are sending to a publication and they publish it, and then they see it in a different publication and they see the exact same version, exact same wording, and the exact same photos, they're not as inclined to publish it again. But if you can tweak it, if you can maybe change the order of the paragraphs, tweak the wording a little bit, and if you've got 12 photos and you're sending to 4 publications, send 3 to each that are different, because they're not going to publish 12 photos. Then you'll find that you're going to be more successful because they feel like you're sending them an exclusive. So I was having a lot of success in publicizing the groups I was with. Then in 2008, I got a call from Walter Kelly, who was the principal then at Lake Highlands High School. And he said, "You can't tell anybody, but we want you to come to Lake Highlands this afternoon. Tony Romo and Will Smith are coming to a pep rally today." Will Smith is in town for a movie he's making, but he wants to do kind of a feel-good deal with the kids. We were going to the playoffs in volleyball and football at that time. He wants to have an intimate little meeting with the football team and the volleyball team and the cheerleaders in the band hall. They've told us absolutely under no circumstances can we have any press, but it's okay if we have the PTA parent who does publicity come and take some photos. So I got to go. And it was wonderful. Tony Romo and Will Smith were as wonderful and fabulous as you can imagine. They didn't care anything about having their photo taken, although they didn't object, but they wanted to interact with the kids and congratulate the kids and have real, honest conversations with the kids and inspire them to do well in their playoff. And so I'm taking pictures and I'm trying to not be fangirling in the band hall. And so then we go out into this packed pep rally, and the people, as some of you with young kids may not know this, but at Lake Highlands High School pep rallies, when there's no pandemic, parents can go and sit and watch the pep rally. So there were parents in there, and of course the kids are all crazy and screaming and all that. And out walks Tony Romo and Will Smith, and of course they really go wild. But so anyway, after I hang up from Walter Kelly, the principal, when he called me, I was sitting at Lake Highlands Cafe, now Cedar and Vine, with Carrie Mitchell, who was a major writer at that time, wrote for Lake Highlands Advocate. And I said, you won't believe who just called me and what they said. So after I wrote about Tony Romo and Will Smith, Advocate came to me and said, okay, here's what we want. We want you to write exclusively for Lake Highlands Advocate. Stop submitting to all the other publications. We want you to have a quota, at least write 6 to 8 stories per week. They need to be such and such many words per story. Spelled out what they wanted me to do, and we want to begin paying you. At that time, I was just submitting publicity for what I wanted them to write for my people. And I said, here's my deal. I will have no quotas. I will have no rules. I will write what I want to write, and you will not pay me. And I will write about the subjects that interest me, and I will not write about anything that does not interest me. And it would be my pleasure to write exclusively for you, and you will not write me a check. And they said, that sounds like a deal to us. And so that's how I began writing exclusively for Advocate magazine. And I love doing it. I've always been a reader. I've always been a huge fan of Advocate, read it cover to cover. And so to be a part of it and learn more about how the insides work, it was always something that it's been something that I've enjoyed doing. So I do I do some career day talks for a few elementaries in Lake Highlands Junior High and the high school. And one of the things that I tell the kids is, you are a journalist. If you have a cell phone, if you have a camera, go out into the community and take pictures, take videos of what's going on in your neighborhood. If there's a car wreck, if there's a fire, if children in your neighborhood are writing chalk messages on the sidewalk, messages of encouragement, if people are putting signs in their window of encouragement during the pandemic, if the kid down the street learned to ride a bike, if the apartment at the end of the block catches on fire and people are out there helping people escape. It could be big, it could be small, but in today's world, a lot of journalism happens because a person on the scene who's not really a journalist captures it on video, captures it on camera, and then it's published by a bigger outlet. But the originator is just the man on the street. And so I think that's ties into Lake Highlands Advocate's theme, which is hyperlocal journalism. People ask me a lot of times where I get my stories, and 99% of the time it's something someone has sent to me. Something's happened at their kid's school, something's happening with their own child, and you should not have any shame in sending to me that your child won an award, did something awesome, is helping other people, became an Eagle Scout, whatever it is. And I love getting that stuff. So as Michael was saying, Lake Highlands Advocate is hyper-local publishing, which is really kind of a special breed unto itself. Although I will say, Dallas Morning News is trying to do a lot more of that. If you really examine what people like Dallas Morning News are doing, and Sharon Grigsby is a friend, and she talks to Toby and I about this quite a bit. she does a lot of stories that are tight to a neighborhood, and she tries to make them interesting to a broader audience. In fact, she's trying to reach out north. She might write something about a McKinney neighborhood or a Frisco neighborhood. She's trying to get more readership in that area, but she tries to frame the story in a way that the broader audience in Dallas will find it interesting. But of course, what we do in Lake Highlands is, at Lake Highlands Advocate, we find a person or a story or something going on that only our audience would find interesting. Frankly, nobody in Oak Cliff would care about anything I'm writing. And that's the way it is designed to be. And you guys would not pick up the Oak Cliff Advocate and find most of that stuff interesting at all. And that's the way it's designed to be. And I should say, I don't know if some of you probably know, some of you may not know, we have 4 publications: Oak Cliff, Preston Hollow, Lakewood / East Dallas, and Lake Highlands. We used to have a North Dallas Advocate, which basically covered Richardson. We don't do that anymore. I sometimes wish we did, because it covered a lot of Richardson ISD stuff. And when that went away, some of the RISD coverage was lessened, but we don't, and it's gone. So some of the posts, Mike was talking about some of the posts I've done in the past. Since I started doing this, it's been a while. The first post I did that really caught a lot of people's attention was called Sure Sign of Getting Old. I'm looking at John Oswald, he might remember this. This was about Toby and I went to dinner on a Friday night at Mi Cocina, and we sat in the bar and we were having a little date night kind of a dinner, and the kids in the bar were just going nuts. It was rowdy night. I don't know if it was a full moon or what. Literally, kids were running, having sword fights with straws, making snow angels on the floor, laying on the floor of the bar, waving their hands, screaming. It was nuts. And that's not how the bar in Mi Cocina usually is. Not that I hang out in the bar at Mi Cocina, but it was crazy. So I came home that night and wrote, what in the heck, is there not some decorum in restaurants, especially are you not safe in the bar at Mi Cocina? And we almost broke the internet with the comments. We finally had to shut down the comments after more than 100. And they were about split 50-50. And they went something like that, something like this. About half people said, Carol Toler hates children. Carol Toler needs to stop going to Mi Cocina and start going to Luby's at 5 o'clock if she can't handle a few children in the bar at Mi Cocina. And the other half said, thank God somebody has finally expressed what I have been feeling when I try to go have a meal and, it's food all over the floor and screaming and nobody attending to their own children. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. And by the way, I'm going to list a few things that I've written. The search bar on Lake Highlands Advocate is really pretty good. So if you say, she said something about sure sign of getting old. If you put sure sign of getting old, or if you put Mi Cocina in there, the story will probably pop up. So one of the things speaking of comments, one of the things we've learned at Advocate is the fact that a story gets a lot of comments does not necessarily mean it's heavily read. And the fact that it gets 0 comments doesn't mean it's not heavily read. It's kind of interesting. Also, in the old days, most people commented directly there on the site, on the WordPress site. These days, most of the comments come on the Facebook page. So if you are dying to comment and you're dying to see your comments seen, and you really want to create a discussion on a topic, the place to do that is the Lake Highlands Advocate Facebook page. So I've written a few other things. I wrote about the center of Lake Highlands. What's the center of Lake Highlands? And that was an interesting discussion. A lot of people had different ideas about that. You know, what is the center of Lake Highlands? Is it Walnut Hill and Skillman? Is it Walnut Hill and Idalia? Is it Abrams Royal? Yeah, what is it? Is it Lake Highlands High School? We get a lot of people talk about North Lake Highlands. Some people complain that we don't cover North Lake Highlands well enough, which is basically north of LBJ. So I think that's an interesting discussion. What is the center of Lake Highlands? And what most people come back to is that Lake Highlands High School is the center. That's the heart of Lake Highlands. Whatever's happening there ties us all together. But it's an interesting discussion. I wrote one about kids going off to college, because that, you know, there were a period of time when that was kind of what interested me the most. Of course, we've written about the Muffin Man a lot. Some of you are too young to probably remember that, but there was an incident with a couple of kids that did a prank and brought marijuana laced muffins to the high school, and some of the teachers ate them. And Miss Rita, who worked in the office, I think she ate 3 or 4, and she was extremely ill and was taken to the hospital. It's interesting to note that she was the first person to forgive the kids. But it was actually, the truth is, and some people don't know this, she was actually extremely ill. They weren't sure if she was going to make it, actually. We've written a lot about Hamilton Park in Advocate. And that's another one that there's a question about, is that Lake Highlands or not? Hamilton Park residents would tell you Hamilton Park is not Lake Highlands. Hamilton Park is Hamilton Park. But we enjoy writing about Hamilton Park because it's such a historic neighborhood, and we probably could write about them every day, every month, because it's so rich in history. But when Hamilton Park received a historic designation as a community, I interviewed some people who lived there, grew up there, have lived there their whole life, and they had some reminiscences about how wonderful it was when they were young children, that their parents would just wave goodbye to them in the morning, and just that they could just kind of go from house to house, because every child on every block knew every mother in every household, and everybody looked after each other. And those were fun memories. And it's not quite the same today. And that's kind of a shame. And one thing I did not know is that Hamilton Park, for such a small community, is broken into 3, is designated to go to 3 different high schools. And that, of course, is a relic of segregation, you know, desegregation days, when Hamilton Park was desegregated. They said, okay, one group go to this high school, one group go to that high school. And I guess so that a large group of African-American children would not all hit one white high school together. But it's, in some ways, if you ask my opinion, it's a little bit of a shame that such a formerly very cohesive neighborhood today, even still, is split into going to 3 different high schools. I've written about Ron Howard quite a bit. He directed a movie at Lake Highlands High School called Cotton Candy. And I tweeted a picture of him wearing a Highlandette t-shirt while he was on the set of his movie at Lake Highlands High School. And he retweeted it. And I wrote about that. And I think he's, of course, has won every award probably there is to win in movie making. And so that was a thrill for me. In 2014, I wrote a series of stories for Lake Highlands High School's 50th anniversary. And some of them were feel-good stories about, you know, reminiscences from Dr. Bob Iden and counselors and former teachers and former students and all that. There were 2 stories that I wrote that were about murders that had happened. One was a cafeteria worker at Lake Highlands High School that was killed there. And it ended up that it was a co-worker's husband that knew that she counted the receipts there at the school cafeteria. And so he and a buddy came in and robbed her and killed her there. I had never heard that story. Another was a Lake Highlands High School senior who was working at the Winn-Dixie that's now at the corner of Royal and Abrams. And Ted Steinke's nodding his head. He must recall that. And she was murdered during that robbery. And I had never heard that story either. You know, doing this is kind of like teaching Sunday school. The teacher's always the one that learns the most. You know, when you teach Sunday school, don't you feel like you learn the most? And so that's part of the reason I love doing it too, is I always learn so much. Lately, some of the stories I've written that I loved, like this year I wrote about Ryan Berg being on The Voice. And he is a Lake Highlands High School graduate that's about my son's age, and he is darling. I had never watched The Voice before. So when I was interviewing him, I know I sounded like an idiot because when I contacted him, he had to call me back with a Warner Brothers rep on the phone because he was, you know, we had all these restrictions and whatever. And I know if it had just been me and him, and I had interviewed him several times before promoting when he was playing at bars or whatever. But while he was on The Voice, she had to be on the phone with him. And I know it was evident as I was talking to him that I had never watched this show before. But anyway, he helped me through it. And then I started watching it. I will never miss that show again. It is the cutest show. And they do have talented people, and the judges are so cute. But anyway, you should be watching The Voice. He's not on it anymore, but he did very well. But it is a really cute show. Also this year, I wrote about the Schultz family over by Moss Haven Elementary, who put out a mailbox for Santa. And it was getting tons of children going over and putting in their letters for Santa. And they were responding to these letters to Santa. And I thought, oh, they're mailing a letter back to little Johnny Dogood. No. They were driving over a response to each child with little gifts in the envelope. These people are saints. And then Sharon Grigsby from Dallas Morning News heard about it and also wrote about it in the Dallas Morning News. And that's another interesting thing. A lot of our advocate stories are picked up by other outlets. Many of you may know Steve Pickup from Channel 11, who lives down the block. A lot of our stories end up on Channel 11 and other channels and in Dallas Morning News in some form or fashion. And people sometimes ask me if that offends me. I am so flattered by that. I love it when, and you know, I'm not saying I've never stolen a story that I've read in Dallas Morning News, but I think it's very flattering when I turn on the TV at 5 o'clock and there's a story that clearly came from something I published at 8 a.m. that day. Also this year, I wrote about the lighted Christmas trees that John Hinton organized that effort. Yeah. It's kind of a kit or an instruction sheet. They really should make some kits actually. It's an instruction sheet, and I think it's it's some boards, and you create a lighted Christmas tree in your yard or a few of them, and it's really kind of exploded. And if I wouldn't be surprised if they're all over Lake Highlands next year. They were all over kind of east of Adelia this year. In 2018, I wrote a Valentine's story about Mike and Mary Tabor and how they met and how they fell in love and whatever. And after that became a real tradition. And that may be one of the things that I'm asked about the most, or at least in the past, this month, people have said how much they have enjoyed reading all the Valentine's love stories. I hope we don't run out of them, because how many people in Lake Highlands are there that married their high school sweetheart? But anyway, people have really loved reading those. And I know we're starting to run out of time. How short are we? Are we okay? Have I got 5 more minutes? Let me tell you about the most interesting development to me is that we're having an evening of web readers versus magazine readers. It used to be that everybody wanted to read what was in the magazine and a few people saw a few things online. It's now about even. So there are now a lot of things in the magazine that aren't online and a lot of things online that are in the magazines, because we know that it's kind of two unique audiences. The magazine has a distribution of 87,000 and 4.8 million people. There's 4.8 million annual page views on the 4 different magazines. The average Advocate reader is 65% are college grads, 56% keep the magazine for a month, 61% are female. Average age 25 to 54, average home value 416,000, average household income 167,000. 92% shop at local boutiques, 88% dine at local restaurants, 81% purchase products or services from Advocate ads. And I think it's interesting comparing Lake Highlands to Lakewood to Preston Hollow to Oak Cliff. Lake Highlands covers 3 zip codes and we get 1.7 million annual page views. Lakewood, which has more, covers 5 zip codes and 1.9 million annual page views, but we're catching up. Preston Hollow has the least, and I think it's because they have so many more magazines and newspapers that cover them. 4 zip codes, 366,000, so a lot less. And Oak Cliff, 6 zip codes, 730,000. So wrapping up, I love what I do. I enjoy covering events and Exchange Club parades and teachers and students doing interesting things and people helping people. I recently covered an RISD candidate forum, and one candidate said, people are a bunch of ignorant schmucks. And it wasn't Poteet who said it. I'll just tell you that right now. But people do say really interesting things. It's like that old show, children say the darndest things. Well, people will say some interesting things. So the most read stories by far are the restaurants. And that's kind of what Michael was saying. People turn to Advocate to know what restaurants are opening and closing and adding a new patio or whatever. And it might seem like a silly story to write, so-and-so's adding a patio, but people want to know that. And so we write it. The second most read story is crime, and that's the one we hate to write. I don't like to write it. I'd rather give it to somebody else. I'd rather we didn't write it at all. And I think most people would rather it not be in there. In fact, we get a lot of criticism for why'd you write that? But people want to know what's going on, and especially kind of what the trends are. I recently wrote about the cash for cell phones deal. People were stealing, cell phones off of joggers, assaulting joggers to grab their cell phones, and it turns out there's some kind of cash for cell phones at ATM at Walmart that may or may not be prodding robbers to go steal cell phones from people. I think people ought to know that. I think people ought to realize if you're out walking your dog, walking your kid, taking a jog, do not stop and look at something on your cell phone, because somebody may be watching you and may come grab your cell phone. I like to write about neighborhood businesses, especially during the pandemic. We've had a bunch of things pop up: bakeries, caterers, jewelry designers. Susan Larkin, Susan Harris, Tom and Michelle Harris's daughter, Susan, developed a business during the pandemic where she puts together kits that people buy, and she delivers them or mails them out or whatever. And if you've got toddlers at home, you can sit down with your toddler and you make these kits, and it's got everything you need: glue sticks, all the different colored pieces, and it's got themes. It might be camping or the ocean or whatever, and it's got activities and whatever. Anyway, it's brilliant, and she's having a great success with it. So that's the kind of thing that I think Advocate's great at. Somebody's got a great idea, and somebody from Lake Highlands is implementing the idea, and people find out about it, and the person becomes more successful because people have heard about it. So I love doing that. And we had the 5th grader who was selling peanut brittle before Christmas, And I know I bought a bunch and it was delicious. So let me also tell you that we have a new editor named Elizabeth Euclid, UCLES. And so I hope you'll have a way to get to know her. We're all like she's EUCLES at advocatemag.com. I'm C Toler at advocatemag.com, but I'll give you also my email, my personal email, caroltoler at AOL.com. If you've got a story you want me to consider writing, email me. You can call me. My cell phone is 214-533-0759. You know, if I can write it, I will. And if I can't, I'll tell you I can't do it. I'm really happy to have leads. If you're somewhere and something interesting is happening, shoot me the pictures. I'd be thrilled and very grateful. If you want to follow my stories, you can friend me on Facebook, or you can like the Lake Highlands Advocate page on Facebook or on Twitter and subscribe to the newsletter, and it'll just all come to you. I'm sorry, I talked a long time. Anybody have questions?
I'm going to jump in with a question, and certainly have some from others, I bet. When I joined the Exchange Club in 2010, some of y'all would remember this, some of you won't. I think we're probably split 50-50 as far as membership here on the Zoom. But Don Lee would send weekly emails, sometimes twice weekly emails, with links to the advocate stories. And before that, that was before I was as deep into Facebook and social media, and that was how I got news about what was going on in Lake Highlands in more real time than just getting the magazine delivered to the front porch and things like that. Don was obviously a big fan of the magazine and of you, and Gail Lewis, who may have jumped off or he may still be on, had asked me to say, to ask you if you had any Don Lee stories you could share with the club.
He was a big fan of mine, and I'm not really sure why, except I think he liked, I know he was a big reader. He wasn't one that was trying to get me to write certain things. He just enjoyed reading it. And then when he found out that I was doing it for no pay, that was when he came to you guys and said, you need to give her an award. But no, I don't really have any stories, except he's near and dear to my heart because he was a Carol Toler fan, and I know he was pretty relentless about sending links to my stories. I'm sure I got lots of hits from that. Well, and here's another part of, I think, why I have been successful and was successful in the beginning getting my stories read is when I was the PTA president at Lake Highlands Freshman Center, what was the Freshman Center, I developed an email list for moms. That was back in, when was that, John Spa? That was 2001. And that was the beginning of what now is the email list for the parent email list. So that was a long time ago. And so when I started doing this, I already had and then with all my subsequent children, I had email lists for all my kids. And so then when I would send email, when I would have links to stories, I would send it out to my email list of people who wanted to receive them. And of course I would say, if you want to be taken off this list, let me know. And so that gave me, and the advocate people would say, how come when we put up a story, nothing happens, and you put up a story and there's an automatic whoosh of people reading the story immediately? Well, it's because of that PTA email, that mommy email list immediately.
Any other questions? Nobody's jumping in. Well, I will say that the least surprising stat that you mentioned earlier was that 61% of the readership is female. I think all of us would agree that our wives are far more informed about what's going on in the neighborhood than we are, and that's probably a good reason. But happy birthday, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a real treat to hear from you, to hear the story about, kind of getting into the journalism business, as it were. the Unsung Hero Award obviously was well deserved. I remember us awarding that to you, and I'm glad that it's something that was meaningful to you. Obviously, that's it's fun handing those out to people, and certainly something that we are glad that you enjoyed.
Very meaningful. Very.
Appreciate it. Yes, thank you very much. All right, I'm trying to think if I've got anything else. I did overlook Principal Jones, who was on the call earlier, and I'm going to scan down to see if she's been able to stick around. But Principal Jones, if you've got an update from the high school, we'd appreciate it. She may be in the middle of getting to school or getting something done at the school, and that's perfect. But thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Carol. Really enjoyed the program. Thanks, Michael. Let's see, I've got a message here. The program job is tough. I'm going to shout out to Bailey here. Scheduling programs is tough, and we had something fall through this week. Bailey was scrambling, and Carol graciously jumped in at the last minute to do the program this morning. But we all owe a great deal of thanks to Michael for putting on good programs every week, and Carol, thank you doubly for doing this at the last minute and doing such an amazing program. That was really enjoyable and entertaining. Loved hearing the stories. So thank you all very much. And, you know, normally we would close and sing sing our song if we were at the KC, and unfortunately with the lag, we can't sing you happy birthday, but happy birthday. And with that, we are adjourned, and until most folks have jumped off, we'll leave the Zoom link open if folks want to stick around and visit. But thank you all and have a great weekend.